On November 23, 1993, the West Coast rap legend Snoop Dogg released arguably one of the most influential gangsta rap albums of all time by the name of Doggy Style. The album was released under the infamous Death Row Records, founded in 1991 by Suge Knight, Dr. Dre, the DOC, and Dick Griffey. This album solidified Snoop as a culture-shaping artist, helping to mold the sound of West Coast gangsta rap. But in the modern day, Snoop is considered one of the most recognized rappers globally for his appearances in numerous films, commercials, TV shows, and various other side quests that have significantly contributed to building his brand. Despite the fame, awards, and riches Snoop has achieved over his lengthy rap career, a particular moment from early on always struck a chord with me and many others alike. It was evident that his success stemmed from more than just hard work. In fact, Snoop had made a pact with the devil from the very beginning, committing himself fully to his career. In today's video, we're dissecting the song and visuals for the track, Murder Was the Case, and exploring how the art seemingly foreshadowed a pivotal moment in Snoop's career, leading to Snoop exchanging his soul for worldly gains. So picture, it's the year 1991 and you got Terminator 2 Judgment Day playing in your local theaters, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is taking over televisions across the nation, and Michael Jackson released his 8th studio album, Dangerous. In the same year, the legendary West Coast rap group NWA was going through a serious rough patch stemming from disagreements amongst the members regarding the direction of their music and label issues. This led the Compton, California rapper and producer Dr. Dre to leave Ruthless Records and form a record label with his bodyguard, Marion Knight, aka Suge Knight, under the name Death Row Records, in partnership with Jimmy Iovine's Interscope Records. The following year, Dr. Dre would go on to release his first solo album titled The Chronic, a 3-time certified platinum project that sold over 3 million copies and remains a classic in the genre today. This album would introduce the world to a young Long Beach, California artist by the name of Snoop Dogg, who would appear on half of the 16 tracks from Dr. Dre's first album. Receiving tons of positive feedback from the fans, Death Row would go on to sign Snoop Dogg as the first official artist on Death Row Records in 1992, with Dr. Dre and the DOC helping Snoop to craft his flow, structure, and lyrics in preparation for his debut album. However, little did Snoop Dogg know that a lyric he rapped just 8 months earlier on Dr. Dre's album was about to come to life. Leading up to the release of his own album, he found himself in serious legal trouble. While this moment could have ended his career, it instead solidified his image as a pioneer of West Coast gangsta rap, marking the transformation of Calvin Broadus into the legendary Snoop Dogg. During the summer of '93, Snoop Dogg and his bodyguard McKinley Lee resided in Culver City side by side in an apartment complex, patiently awaiting the completion of Snoop's new home. Snoop typically rolled with his bodyguard, and his recent purchase of a black Grand Jeep Cherokee turned heads in the neighborhood. However, Snoop's stay in the neighborhood would eventually lead to a heap of trouble and a surprising turn of events that in a way was eerily foreshadowed just months before in his music. On the evening of August 25th, 1993, Philip Woldemariam, a 20-year-old son to Ethiopian migrants, known for his affiliation to a local Crip gang referred to as the Buy Yourself Hustler Gang, was hanging with his 2 friends, Deshaun Lee Joseph and Jason Lendon. The 3 were on their way to a local park in Los Angeles to eat dinner and buy some weed. Earlier that afternoon, Woldemariam had stashed a loaded handgun in the door of Joseph's car. As they headed to the park in Joseph's car, Woldemariam noticed a man named Abrams standing in front of Calvin Broadus, better known as Snoop Dogg's apartment. During this time, Snoop and McKinley Lee, who also goes by Malik, were in the apartment preparing to hit the studio when they heard the commotion and decided to check things out. According to Lee, Snoop's bodyguard, he told Snoop to stay back for his safety. Observing Sean Abrams, a member of the Dog Pound, arguing with Philip Woldemariam, who Lee states in his interview with DJ Vlad, flashed a weapon. Sensing escalating tensions, Snoop and Lee opted to stay in the apartment for a bit to let things cool off. while Waldemariam and Abrams engaged in a brief gang-related dispute, prompting Joseph to speed away from the scene. Lee recalls that he, Snoop, and Abrams decided to head to the studio as things seemed to have cooled down. On their way, they realized they had forgotten something essential for the session, so Snoop turned back, and while en route to the crib, they noticed the man from earlier, Philip Waldemariam, in the street, basically flagging them down, which they found odd, of course. So they decided to pull over, to which Philip shifted toward the sidewalk near some bushes. Feeling uneasy, Lee stated he had his weapon on his lap, just in case things got messy. While they were parked, one of Waldemariam's friends approached the vehicle, apologizing for his actions. However, moments later, Waldemariam rapidly approached Snoop's Jeep but was pushed back by his friend. In response, Waldemariam attempted to reach for his weapon, prompting Lee to swiftly grab his gun, letting off about 5 to 6 shots at Waldemariam, leading Snoop, Lee, and Abrams to flee the scene. According to Lee, the news was blowing certain details out of proportion and mixing things up, largely because the case involved a famous gangsta rapper. Some sources claim that Snoop and the others chased down Philip, which just wasn't true. Following the shooting, Waldemariam's two friends, Joseph and Lyndon, hid his gun before the police arrived in hopes of shifting the blame elsewhere. Initially, they told detectives that Waldemariam had been unarmed, but they changed their story later during the grand jury investigation. Waldemariam's family claims that Joseph and Lyndon altered their accounts out of fear of gang retaliation associated with Snoop Dogg. However, the police found no evidence of such threats. Sophia, Waldemariam's sister, criticized the defense's portrayal of her brother, suggesting that much of what was said about him was fabricated by high-paid attorneys. She expressed frustration over allegations that Waldemariam had threatened Snoop Dogg a month before the shooting at a gas station, an accusation for which the prosecutor found no evidence and which Snoop Dogg's lawyer did not substantiate. This investigation painted a complex picture of gang tensions, self-defense claims, and the subsequent impact on Snoop Dogg's rising career. Earlier, I mentioned how Snoop Dogg drew inspiration for Murder Was the Case from lyrics he used on Dr. Dre's album in '92. Remarkably, these lyrics seem to have played out in the real world just months later, specifically the murder case part. On the track Lil Ghetto Boy from The Chronic, Snoop Dogg opens his verse by saying, "Wake up, jumped out my bed. I'm in a two-man cell with my homie Lil half dead. Murder was the case that they gave me. Dear God, I wonder can you save me?" These eerie lyrics were a haunting foreshadowing, considering he would end up facing serious murder charges just months later. After the tragic death of Philip Waldemariam in August of '93, Snoop Dogg and his bodyguard evaded authorities for about a week, following Suge Knight's strategy to ensure Snoop appeared at the MTV Awards to promote his upcoming album.
I took him because I knew one thing. For me to make this dude the most hottest artist in the world, people gotta see him. So I know we taking up as a chance, but at the same time, it's his job to be an artist and promote this stuff. And then when they come to arrest him, it's my job to get him out of there, get him out of there, get him out of there.
In a bold move, Snoop managed to go on live TV, give an interview, and even announce an award winner while the LAPD waited outside, ready to arrest him. Acting on Suge Knight's advice, Snoop turned himself in afterward, with Suge Knight attempting to coordinate a calm scene with the LAPD upon his exit. Less than 24 hours later, Suge Knight posted a $1 million bail securing Snoop's release, which of course got everyone talking about how Snoop and Death Row were making power moves in the game. Unfortunately for McKinley Lee, he was not granted bail since he was the one who pulled the trigger. Lee wound up spending a year in solitary confinement before he would be granted bail and let out. Capitalizing on the tragic incident, Death Row had more eyes than ever on their artist and his upcoming album, set to release 3 months later in November. The album already had singles lined up like Who Am I and Gin and Juice, but fans found themselves gravitating to the track Murder Was the Case due to the ongoing murder case. The track Murder Was the Case, subtitled Death After Visualizing Eternity, portrays a 22-year-old Calvin being granted a second chance at life and the opportunity to see his girl give birth to their baby, on the condition that he surrenders his soul. Essentially, it delves into the theme of making a pact with the devil to attain one's desires, depicting Snoop himself as trading his soul for material success. The popularity of the track led Death Row to produce a short film telling the story of the lyrics, which was paired with a soundtrack for the film. The soundtrack even managed to reach #1 on the Billboard charts in 1994. The soundtrack and short film received mixed feedback. Many fans loved the raw gangsta music he was making, while others felt the song was insensitive given the real-life events. Some believe the visuals, which depicted Snoop as a victim, were intended to sway public perception in his favor before the trial even began. After performing Murder Was the Case at the 1994 MTV Video Music Awards, Snoop would end his epic performance by proclaiming his innocence in an attempt to clear his name in the court of public opinion.
Murder was the case that they gave me. I'm innocent. I'm innocent.
On November 27, 1995, the trial finally began, spanning a total of 86 days and closing out on February 21st, 1996.
We, the jury in above entitled action, find the defendant, Calvin Brodus, not guilty of the crime of murder in the first degree.
In Snoop's corner was criminal defense lawyer David Kenner, and at one point popular lawyer Johnny Cochran was also hired for a brief period. Cochran at the time was recently in the headlines for representing O.J. Simpson in his infamous murder case less than 2 months before. Despite such a publicized trial, Snoop managed to keep a level head throughout and continued to promote his upcoming music. Still, in interviews, especially after the trial was completed, he would get asked about the story behind Murder Was the Case and how a song turned into a whole album and short film, to which he said,
I think I could do that. That's what I did when Murder Was the Case. It was a song off of my album Doggy Style. We took that song and put it on the soundtrack by itself and made that song a whole soundtrack, and it blew up and we did a movie off of it. First time ever.
Again, with Suge in Snoop's corner, he knew how to capitalize on the case, solidifying Snoop's image as a genuine gangster rapper and not just a studio gangster.
He's made millions since the killing. MTV will cover his trial live and could make millions more.
Now, in that same interview from earlier, Anada Lewis asked Snoop,
was it kind of eerie for you? I remember the album cover on that one, and you had your own,
obituary, like.
Was that, how did that feel for you? I don't know, some people were uncomfortable looking at it because of how
it was vibe. It was just vibe. At the time being, it was just vibe. I just felt that. You know what I'm saying? When I wrote that song, it just came to me like that. It was more or less of a lesson in that song. Like, if you were in this situation, Snoop, and you got shot and you were put in a coma and then God blessed you to get out the coma, are you going to do the right things or do the wrong things? And I was telling myself that I was going to do the wrong things through this song, but knowing in my heart that the right thing would be what I would do in real life.
As you heard, Anada asked Snoop about the eeriness of him putting out an album with the cover displaying his very own obituary. Of course, he gave his answer back then, but this is where further speculation comes from fans and myself alike. I should mention that Audible released a 1.5-hour episode titled From the Streets to the Suites, Words Plus Music, Volume 36, narrated by Snoop, where he states, quote, "My peers, we wrote about death. You see, and I wrote that song Murder Was the Case where I was like, I came when my boo-boo's about to have my baby. She wasn't even pregnant and I hadn't even caught the murder case," he said of the iconic 1993 track, taken from his debut studio album Doggy Style. Quote, "That's the fucking crazy part about it. He was born May 20th, right? 1994. The murder case was in August of 93. So I wrote Murder Was the Case about some shit that had never happened in my life. I didn't have a baby. I didn't have a murder case. But my penmanship was writing shit that was about to happen." This ties into the idea that words are powerful and people should be careful about what they speak into existence. On the other hand, it raises a larger question about whether the entire incident was staged to promote Snoop as an artist and push the gangsta rap sound to communities across the nation, despite the potential harm this type of music could cause. Now, while on the topic of this whole scenario behind, what happened to Snoop early in his career potentially being staged, there are a few things worth considering about the whole event, and I'll just point out a few things that come to mind. One, we know that Snoop and his bodyguard somehow managed to go to the MTV Awards, and Snoop was able to do an interview, and he even announced a winner for one of the awards. and the LAPD were just patiently waiting outside. Like, celebrity or not, if there's a warrant out for your arrest and it's for a fucking murder, you would think the police wouldn't grant you the luxury of doing these things. Some could say, hey, it's just celebrity treatment, but
I doubt it.
The next thing is the same judge from the O.J. Simpson case acquitted Snoop Dogg and McKinley Lee, his bodyguard. These high-profile kind of trials are often dubbed like made-for-TV trials, and they generate substantial advertising revenue, which they actually talked about on the news, which I'll play that clip again.
He's made millions since the killing. MTV will cover his trial live and could make millions more.
And then lastly is this article that came out a couple years after the tragic death, and it stated that the LAPD claimed that much of the evidence gathered from the scene on August 25th, 1993, the day of the crime, was accidentally damaged. And conveniently, none of that evidence would have made any difference on the case anyways.
You don't find that suspicious?
But I want to hear what you guys have to say about this in the comments, so, sound off down there. Of course, that's a large claim, but you never truly know, as it would kind of tie into the rap and prison industrial complex theory, suggesting that rap is being used to influence young black youth into a life of crime, leading them to prison and helping to expand the prison's earnings. But anyway, after sifting through comments and forums to gauge public opinion on the meaning of the short film for the song Murder Was the Case, I determined that there are 3 types of outlooks regarding what it symbolized in Snoop's career. So on one side, fans saw the devil in the film as a metaphorical representation of Suge Knight, a Piru blood often seen in all red suits and known for his aggressive and controlling demeanor. They believed he acted as the devil in Snoop's life, dictating how it operated. On the other hand, you have fans simply stating that it's just an instance of art imitating life with no ulterior motive or anything truly conspiratorial behind it. And of course, you got folks like myself and probably a good chunk of you who decided to click on this video, who thought without a shadow of a doubt that this video symbolized Snoop Dogg's Faustian bargain done before our very eyes. Naturally, many wonder what the act of selling one's soul truly means, and it's important to understand that there isn't just one direct way to sell one's soul. Like sins in the scriptures, there isn't just one definitive sin that would send you to eternal hellfire. There are multiple actions one could take to defy God's word. In saying that, you must have the discernment to see that selling one's soul doesn't always necessitate the sacrifice of a close friend or family member, as one can also forego their morals to promote a negative lifestyle to the heavily influenced audience for their gain. And that in itself is arguably worse, as it affects way more than just a few people. Quick side note, after the tragic murder of Philip Woldemariam, Snoop's next album, The Dogfather, strayed away from mentioning death in the lyrics and kind of focused more on the G-Funk sound. This move risked losing some fans who wanted that raw stuff from him, but he still decided to take his music in that direction. However, this change didn't last forever, as he would still go on to discuss that theme later on in his other releases. Alright, back on track. When reading the lyrics from Murder Was the Case, the original track off the album Doggy Style, the devilish voice tells Snoop,
"Bring your lifestyle to me, I'll make it better.
How long will I live? Eternal life and forever. And will I be the G that I was?
I'll make your life better than you can imagine or ever dreamed of.
So relax your soul, let me take control. Close your eyes, my son, my eyes are closed." This is Snoop in verse 1 being tempted by the devil's offerings, with little resistance surrendering his soul in exchange for the promise of a better life. In verse 2, Snoop says, "Living like a baller, loc. Having money and blowing hella chronic smoke. I bought my mama a Benz and my boo-boo a Jag, and now I'm rolling in a 9 El Durad.
Just remember who changed your mind, cause when you start set tripping, that ass is mine."
Indeed, agreed, proceed to smoke weed. Here, the devilish voice reminds Snoop that he's forever indebted to him, as he's given Snoop everything he could have wanted on the condition that he continues to do as told. Of course, the visuals that accompanied the track were nothing short of creepy, especially when I watched it as a kid way back in the day, not being able to fully process what I was seeing. The music video starts with Snoop being shot, put into a coma, and rushed to the hospital. He slowly begins to open his eyes to find blood all over him and doctors hovering over him in an attempt to save him. While resting on the hospital bed, the devil creeps through the window of Snoop's room in the form of a crow, which then morphs into a man, symbolizing the devil. The crow, a bird associated with death for centuries in many different cultures, fits the story as Snoop is about to die. As Snoop lays there, the devil gets up from his seat and proceeds to close Snoop's eyes, effectively signifying that his soul has been relinquished. Seconds later, the devil morphs into Christ for a brief moment, symbolizing that Snoop chose to listen to the devil over Christ. As the video goes on, you see Snoop enjoying the spoils of his bargain, only to be reminded by the devil while sitting in his car that he is forever in control of his life. The video then closes out with the devil standing over Calvin Broadus's grave, with Snoop lying there in the casket buried alive. This closing scene effectively symbolizes the metaphorical death of Calvin Broadus, allowing his new self to be reborn as Snoop Dogg. The man who chose the darker path in exchange for material and worldly gains now lives on as the controlled persona. Alright, so real quick, for those new to the channel, gematria is the ancient practice of coding numbers into letters of the alphabet, originating from Kabbalah, also known as Jewish mysticism, and later applied to the English language. By using gematria along with date numerology, you'll begin to notice some peculiar patterns surrounding key moments throughout the narrative. Firstly, I noticed that the murder of Philip Woldemariam occurred on a date with 145 numerology, which coincidentally matches the name of the prime suspect, Calvin Cordozar Broadus Jr., better known as Snoop Dogg. This alignment is notable as the story likely wouldn't have received nearly as much coverage if he hadn't been involved. Oh, and remember that trusty lawyer on Snoop's side, David Kenner? You could see his name aligns with his high-profile client's full name, which I thought was quite convenient. Now, when talking about rappers, it's almost inevitable that we'll spot the number 38 in the narrative, as the number is linked to the word rapper and the subject matter often discussed in their music. And of course, Snoop's debut album Doggy Style was released on the 23rd of November 1993, which happens to leave 38 days in the year. I also found it interesting that Murder Was the Case on the original album runs a length of 3 minutes and 38 seconds long, with emphasis on the number 38 because, as we know, the word murder holds the value of 38. Now here is where you could see how the date numerology can share an interesting alignment. The death of Philip Woldemariam took place on August 25th, a date that can be written as 8/25, and it wasn't until 825 days later that the trial for the case would commence. Despite Snoop thinking of and writing the lyrics for the track Murder Was the Case a year before he was hit with real murder charges, I found it interesting how this infamous title aligns with the victim's last name of the actual case, both holding the value of 66 in the reduction ciphers. What's even more fascinating is how McKinley Lee, Snoop Dogg's bodyguard who pulled the trigger killing Philip Woldemariam, has a 3-for-3 match in the base ciphers with the victim's last name. Additionally, it connects to the title of the infamous track in the ordinal ciphers with that 183 connection. Finally, the fact that Mr. Woldemariam's death occurred on the 25th day of the month, when the word death equates to 25, doesn't seem like much of a coincidence, but as always, I'll leave that up for you watching to decide. So, with a career spanning over 30 years in the rap game, Snoop Dogg has endured near career-ending challenges from the outset, shedding the label of a drug-dealing pimp to become a media sensation. Known for collaborations with Martha Stewart and spearheading peaceful marches to open dialogue between the LAPD and LA gangs, Snoop has undergone a significant transformation over the years. It appears he has reaped many of the benefits often associated with those making a Faustian bargain. And in a full circle moment, after many ups and downs with the label that gave him his shot in the game in the early 90s, Snoop Dogg went on to purchase the label himself to become the owner of Death Row Records in February of 2022. But I mean, what do you guys think? Did Snoop really sell his soul for fame in a pact with the devil all the way back in the 90s? And if so, was it worth it? And if you don't think so, feel free to say why in the comments below. But that's all I got for you guys today. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'm gonna catch you guys in the next one. Peace. Peace. Peace.